I'm Bob Osland. I'm with School Exec Connect, and my colleague Aldo Sotoli, also with School Exec Connect. Aldo just joined us after recently retiring as superintendent of schools in Roseville, and I 14 years ago joined. Joined the firm when I retired from the licensing school district. But it's great to see you here. The school board, on behalf of the board, we really appreciate, people who care enough about this place to want to be involved in this very, very important process. And your presence here really underscores that. And everybody has a feedback form, I think, and if you don't, I'll make sure you have one. There are pencils over on the table over here too, if you need one, or pens. And just to explain a little bit about what this entails. So, you're the fifth interview group today, I think, the community group, and we started with principals and students and directors and support staff and teaching staff, so I guess you're the sixth. And so each group filled these out. And after the session, they're copied. They go into a notebook for each school board member. So this is your opportunity to give direct feedback to the board regarding how you think the candidates need to profile, and work with the constituent groups you have, and so on. So it's very important, and the school board it's their role and responsibility, obviously, to make this decision. But input from you is a critical part of the process, and one they look forward to receiving. So you can fill it out as you go along, or we'll wait around afterwards until you have completed it, and so we can make sure it's part of the process. This session will go until 6 o'clock, or when you run out of questions, whichever comes first. Okay, and part of our role to keep that on time too. And candidates, we'll have dinner with the board and then back here on a board interview, which you certainly can return for as an observer. It's an open meeting, of course. Any questions about any of that? Okay, well, and in each of these sessions, we'll introduce a candidate. The candidate will tell you some things about themselves and their career, and then we'll open it up to your questions. The questions, you can ask almost any question you want to ask. There are some that are not legal. You cannot ask, for example, about a person's personal, family, religious preference, things like that. Those are literally illegal questions. So if anybody happens to venture down a road like that, I'll jump up and let you know, whatever. So when you have a question you'd like to ask, just raise your hand, and I'll make sure that everybody gets to ask at least one and go from there. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Heidi Hahn, someone who probably needs no introduction to you, but nevertheless, she's obviously your current assistant superintendent. Heidi will tell you a little bit more about herself, and then we'll go to your questions. So, Heidi.
Thanks so much, Bob. First of all, it's a pleasure to be with you this evening, so thank you for taking the time out to be a part of this and hopefully learn some more about why I'm applying to be your assistant superintendent for Brainerd Public Schools. I've had a lot of chances to speak to people today, and many of those people have known me quite in depth, so I'm going to do my best to hopefully share something new that some of you might not know. But this is my 26th year working in Brainerd Public Schools, so this has been my home where I've spent the majority of my career. And actually, this is a place that's very special and near and dear to my heart. I was one of the fortunate students or kids to grow up coming to Brainerd. So I had grandparents who had a little place on a lake, and so I grew up coming to visit Grandma and Grandpa, and my mom and dad would tell you that I learned to walk and talk and catch crappies and water ski, and I have a very fond memory of Paul Bunyan, just because of the exposure I had coming to this lovely area. And so when I went off, I actually grew up in the city in Roseville, Minnesota. I attended Concordia Academy as a high school, and I left there on a volleyball scholarship. It took me out to Montana State. So Bozeman, Montana, still just, I love Bozeman. But I did my undergraduate and graduate work there in education, health, and human development. And then I was getting very homesick after spending some time so far away from home, and started interviewing back in the cities and realized the cities was a very busy place. And so started looking Brainerd, and my first job in Brainerd was actually at Confidence Learning Center. So I worked at Camp Confidence as a therapist there, and then was fortunate enough, I started coaching volleyball at Brainerd High School, and I accepted a position as a mental health professional in their schools. So that's one of the things I find fascinating about Brainerd. Brainerd's had a connection in mental health embedded in all their buildings for over 30 years. And so I started my career in the basement of this building. So I was working, they called it the last stop for kids before they got sent out to residential care. So Brainerd was innovative and thought, we're going to bring some mental health supports in the building to try to keep the kids with us and not have them leave our communities. Interesting though, they stuck us between the two band practice rooms. So Lena Simmons and Dean Trespass, because our kids tended to be a little bit rambunctious. So that way we weren't being too loud in this building, but those of you who know this building really well, if you don't, we should take you on a tour. There are lots of hidden trapdoors and underground tunnels that exist. So when I lost a kid, I really, really lost a kid in this building. But I had the good fortune from, after doing mental health here, I was asked to start the program over at Franklin Junior High School. So I started a mental health program there for our 8th and 9th graders at the time. And while I was there, I went back to school and got a master's in school counseling. So I really thought I wanted to really get embedded in the school system and be a part of that. However, when I was interning, I realized that transcripts and things just weren't really a bucket filler for me. I really liked the action with the kids and what was happening. So an assistant director of special ed came and said, Heidi, you really need to become a special education teacher. And I kind of said, I just finished school, 2 years of school, I don't want to go back to school. And she's like, don't worry, it's just another year. So I did, I went back and I got my special education license in the areas of emotional behavioral disorders. And I took my first job at Lincoln Elementary School. And I will admit, I survived 1 year as an elementary teacher. I'm definitely a middle school, high school type of instructor. I like those challenges that come with our older students and kind of the conversations we get to have. So from there, I went over and I was a special education teacher at Brainerd High School. And then I moved over to Alternative Learning Center as a special education teacher there. In the midst of that, I love school so much, I went back and got my administrative licenses as a director of special education and a K-12 principal. And I had the fortunate opportunity to become the assistant director of special education. And I have to tell you, that is where I think I really grew in my love and fondness for the entire system of Brainerd Public Schools. So I had the opportunity as the assistant director, I got to go to every building and every site and work with every grade level. And one of the things too that a lot of people don't realize in our school system, and as part of the Full Learning Cooperative, that's the special education cooperative we're associated with, we serve a student's birth to 21. And as I shared in my first interview, we get phone calls for students before they're even born. And we start working with those families, and the teachers start working with those kiddos. And so I really got to know a whole large system. And from there, I became the director of special education. So I got to take all that fascination and the busyness of being involved in systems. I did it for 6 school districts that are part of the cooperative, and 3 charter schools and 4 private schools, and just really fascinated and trying to work and support on behalf of our students. In the midst of that, and on the crux of the failed referendum in 2008, I became fascinated with why in a district system of 13 schools did things function differently. And I really started to focus on leadership and the leadership practices that were happening. So I went back to school. I just love school, a constant learner. And I got my doctorate in education administration. And the big thing about getting your doctorate is you really have to pick an area you're passionate about, that you want to research. And I was passionate about what were leadership practices that were happening that had a direct impact on teacher job satisfaction. Because the one thing we know that makes the most significance in a student's learning is the teacher that's in front of that student. So that's been my research, my passion. I continue to study that. And I think leadership matters significantly. And that's one of the reasons, too, when you look at the role of a superintendent, being able to leverage your leadership team and the capacity of that team to continue to make great things happen for kids. Besides all that, some other fascinating things. I was one of the first people appointed to the Professional Educator Licensing and Standards Board, or PELSB. Education, we like lots of initials. But what happened legislatively is we used to have teacher licensing with the Minnesota Department of Education, and we used to have it with the Board of Teaching. And the legislature decided, nope, that's not going to happen anymore. they made a governmental branch that's controlled, and the governor appoints people to that, and I was one of the first people appointed by Governor Dayton. So I got to sit through a Senate confirmation hearing. So I would say that's probably one of the more intimidating processes I've been through. You want to see people research you and ask questions, sit through a Senate confirmation hearing. So I got the privilege of doing that. And I learned a lot, because that's the board too, when you look at standards and how standards are set in our content areas. That's really happening through that organization and that agency. And you look at how they interpret. So when we did licensing too, to give an example. So licensure, it was historical. How we issue teacher licenses. Now there's tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3 and tier 4, and there's all these requirements. So when we first became a board, they had written the law for those licensing and standards. However, there was no rule around that. So you're trying to make determination and judgments without the rule behind that. So there's a whole complex process with open meetings and input and posts for 60 days. So they do the same thing with standards too. So when you look at our content areas, that's the governing board that happens with that. So learned a lot. And selfishly, I took that position, a volunteer position, to really learn about licensing, because in the world of special ed, there's a huge shortage of teacher licensure period, but in special ed, a significant one. An interesting factor tidbit, just so you can write this down and look at new data in 23. So Pellsby is responsible for a supply and demand report. So they did it in 2019, 21, and they're going to come to 23. 54% of teachers in the state of Minnesota that hold a teaching license aren't teaching. So we're not really short of teachers. We're just short of licensed teachers coming into buildings. So, and it's going to be something we continue to have problems with. So that's one of my experiences, and I think a huge growth area, and it has a significant impact on the system, and it was a privilege to serve on that. I was Brainerd Educator of the Year in 2015. It's probably one of the biggest highlights of my career, when you get nominated by your colleagues that you walk alongside of every day, that they stop and pause and give you that honor as well. So that's a little bit about myself and my education, and maybe some highlights. So with that, hopefully you have lots of good questions.
Yeah.
Just all right.
Hi. So anyway, well, thank you for applying for this job. You are well qualified, and among the candidates, you by far are so ingrained with this district, and you do such a great job. And so I just say that from my experience serving on the board. But my question is, we're going to have to run a levy referendum. The CARES money runs out in 24. Is that still correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So in the next 2 to 3 years, how do you feel about that? Because you would have to be the face of that referendum.
Okay, well, first, thank you for your kind words, and
Okay.
Director Nystrom. I think the timing stinks, I'll be quite honest, when you're coming on the back of a pandemic, and now we also have a war going on in Ukraine, and we look at inflation. So when you look at an operating levy, I think the timing is awful. When you think about all the things that our businesses have been facing over the last couple of years, and now what families are going to face with cost of inflation. And so as a district to then come back and say, here's what we need, it's going to be a challenge, but it's something we need. I've been here 26 years, and stepping into administration, every single year as an administrator, all we've done is cut. And the reason most people don't feel it is we do all we can to protect the classroom and all we can to protect the direct services with our students. But there's a lot of people who are doing the jobs of 2 and 3. And the other thing is, we're maintaining, but this is a district that prides itself in innovation and opportunity. And we're not necessarily getting that add-on. So we had a huge add-on thanks to the community with our facilities. Now I'm so excited that, or what are they calling it, post-demic? We're at that we get to open facilities, and we're finally having our grand openings, because if you haven't been in them, wow. Wow, wow, wow. And the changes and opportunities we created just within facilities, if you haven't had the opportunity to walk in the high school and see the career technical side and culinary arts, it's going to create opportunity for our students. We're doing that operating within the very same resources we have. So when people say you need to be more efficient, I think we've been highly efficient. When you look at the number of districts throughout the state who have an operating levy, we're in the small percentage of the districts that don't. So average district gets $800 more per pupil from the operating level than we do. We're at 0 for that. How do you do it? I think we have to do it through clear and transparent communication. I think you have to do it by getting people into our facilities. I think you have to do it by letting people see the amazing things we do. I mean, if you look at arts and academics, I mean, our orchestras, our choir programs, we offer every athletic opportunity -2 in the state. We offer adaptive athletics. We are doing amazing things. But I honestly can tell you, most of the people that are doing that work are so busy doing the work, they're not really sharing our story. And so I think part of that operating levy is truly sharing your story, and getting more people involved in that. So I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be hard. I also think it's having to be respectful for the situation that our businesses and our community members are in.
When do you think that referendum will be run?
Yesterday.
Oh.
That's a great question. I think that's going to be a planning process, and I think the other thing that has to happen is a strategic plan first. I think we have done, and the work has been so intensely focused on our construction, and then surviving a pandemic in the midst of construction. So the fact that we've navigated all of those fairly well, kudos to the people and the community members supporting our system. Fiscally, when you look at CARES dollars ending in 2024, we're going to get close. I think we're trying to be as creative as we can as to leverage that. Right now, the state of Minnesota is sitting on billions in surplus. Not just millions, billions. Right? And so there's been inequity in funding. And when you look at the amount of money we spend in cross-subsidy for special education, which the federal government said they would fully fund, they haven't even come close to meeting that mandate. So I'm hoping that something will happen legislatively to help us have some of that stability long term. But that's something we can't rely on. We can't pin our hopes for our kids and our community on what might happen. So I really think the strategic plan is going to come first, and identifying the priorities. Those of us who've been around, and I was around 2008, was awful. I still feel like staff talked like it's yesterday. That was 15 years ago. But that was kind of a, if you don't, then we will. This is hopefully, if you do, then this will happen. Right? We need to be able to advance forward and move forward. And we made huge advancements. I mean, there's blessings and curses that came with COVID. When you look at the education system and how it got flipped up on its end, and how the district, and I'll compare us to anybody in the state because I have lots of good friends and colleagues in the metro, this school system within 5 days had emergency care open and running. And not just short, we were 6 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. to start. And our staff were stepping up for that. They were serving 10,000 meals a week. We went from, remember, if you were an elementary parent, okay, just looking at one in the front, hi, here's one device for your 2 kids. You go ahead and tell them to share that and we'll get education done. That didn't go so well. Shortly after that, coming into the fall, we had a device in every single student's hand, K-12. This is a rural community that doesn't have broadband internet in every area. We ensured that kids had internet access. Right? That's amazing. It's amazing, but that's part of our target, our plans we need to keep moving forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's a great question.
Somebody else? Yes.
Speaking of athletic opportunities, one of the concerns that I have is knowing the district's push for equity, not equality, but equity. How will, as a superintendent, what things would you do or to protect women's sports, girls' sports, from transgender or biological males competing?
Well, there's lots of, so I didn't mean to interrupt.
And I don't know how much you have to do with that as a superintendent, but the girls' sports, how do we protect women's rights in girls' sports?
Well, there's lots of things that are happening statewide. So there's going to be laws and things that protect the transgender student participating. So it's not going to be a school district that can say you're not going to.
Right.
Okay, so I think there's going to be things that we need to work with in our system to make those equitable opportunities and access, rather than the students, female, transgender, binary. So following those guidelines and being transparent with that communication, but that student deserves that access.
Sure.
It's in balance. Question?
Yes, yes.
With the current political divide blending into education, as you've seen over the last couple of years, multiple issues that got up right here in this room, how are you going to make sure that both sides are heard when making those difficult decisions? And to give the perception, because there's perceptions all over, but to give the perception that everybody is being heard when making those decisions.
No, that's a great question too. I think our board has done a nice job, but 3 minutes of public comment isn't necessarily input into that decision. So again, when I think about strategic planning, one of those things would be a communication plan, and then how do we get that input? I think you were a great example at our community equity conversation where you talked about, geez, I wish I would have had that information, before this, and now I have it. So I think it's being able to open those doors and have that out for everyone to see. It is divided. It's been an awesome day. I feel like I've been on the best field trip ever, just so you know. But sitting with our students has been the highlight probably of my last decade in my career, honestly. They were very insightful, and they are feeling that. that was repeated throughout their questions. They are very much feeling the polarization, and it is creating great angst amongst them. They do not like how it feels. They do not like how it's playing out in their hallways at all. And so I think it's our responsibility as adults of how do we then work together, and how do we be respectful in our interactions, and how do we come to those solutions together. So the more input we have, the better outcome we're going to have for our students in our community. But I think that's a lot of it. And when it comes to the equity piece, like you sat through that, there's a small group of people trying to navigate that. We had a meeting 2 weeks ago, that advisory. We missed a huge pocket of students. All of a sudden somebody said, what about our foster care kids? Here's a highly intelligent group of adults who've been really focused on how are we going to make sure each student feels safe, welcomed, like they belong. And we thought, we haven't even talked about our foster kids. There's over 200 kids on a daily average in foster care within our system. They hadn't even entered our conversation. So some of that is going to be graciousness and understanding that we're not going to know it all at once either. But the more insight and input we have, the better it will be. And I think making sure we're united in our focus. Our focus is about outcome for students. It's not about how Heidi Hahn feels right now, or about how you feel right now. It's about what we need to do for our students.
If selected as superintendent, what are your plans in place to bring our district back to the basics and policies that are in place against disruptive behaviors regarding the middle and high school students who are allowed to identify as animals, such as furries, and who are allowed to cough up fur balls, meow their answers, and hiss?
Okay, so it's a very interesting question, because in speaking with our administration, we haven't had that play out. So I think there's students who've tested some of the things, but it's not like we have a large group of students that are identifying that way or doing those things from the same conversation of the litter boxes in there. So part of that, I think, is having the student voice represented. So there's some adults who think, because I've answered this question, and I know Ms. Rusk has taken multiple questions at the high school about it happening. The extent it's being played out isn't there. But I think our students need to represent that and be able to voice that and say that. Now, behavior, again, seeing with the student group, they are very frustrated with some of the disrespect, some of the polarization that's occurring. And how are we as adults going to respond to that? How are we going to make them feel safe? And I think that's the key in doing that. So is there such a thing as spray? I've heard of that, but again, being in our settings, I have not seen somebody walking somebody by the leash or somebody doing those things. I do know in the middle school, there was a group of middle school students who thought it was really funny when we still had our face coverings. They would bark or meow, but it was like I have a group of 35 kids in front of me and somebody would do it, and that kind of became a game.
I would talk to parents because I believe it's a lot more than what you're seeing.
And that's
because
why
I have a lot of parents reaching out to me with concerns, and as an elementary school parent, it's terrifying that we would allow one child that is human to identify as an animal.
And again, that's where I've talked directly to our principals, and that's why I think the parent and having that, if that parent wants to talk directly to the principal. And the other thing is getting back into our buildings, getting back at events, right? So that's open so people can come back in and see what's happening and listening. But I do think there's some behavior concerns. I don't think it's the furry piece. I do think we've had disrespect and some isolation that's occurring. But for that parent, I would want them to go right to the principal, and I'd want to be right involved.
And teachers, I don't believe should have to be that voice, because if they do it right or if they do it wrong, I believe they could be reprimanded for even going against what this person might identify as.
I think that's the conversation that has to occur.
With the teacher?
Well, teachers are the ones that are in front of the students every day, right? So if something's happening in the classroom, but what I hear is it's a group of parents. So I'd want those group of parents to come sitting in with that building administrator. And then I think there's opportunity to get into our buildings and see what's happening. You know, it's been fun to go back, but I have been in the high school multiple times in the last 2 weeks, and I'm not, even on a day of Warrior Day where there was great activity and great flexibility to go do and choose different activities, and not once did any of that happen with the group of students to be able to see invisible. I will admit, we did have one student dressed up as a polar bear, and that student was very respectful, but it was a polar plunge. And so he was very cognizant of all these rumors and things happening, that he went to the principal and said, I'd really like to do this to help our Special Olympians, but I also know people are going to think this. So that's the communication. I want people in. I want people to come look. Rather than responding and thinking in fear, come in. Let's have that conversation.
Congratulations on being a finalist,
Oh,
first of all.
Thank you.
I've got a son and daughter that I teach in the school district, and I know, like many businesses, there's morale and workloads increasing. It's a challenge on morale. What are your ideas for the future for the teachers and the staff to deal with the workloads increasing and the morale?
It has been rough. And I think too, some of the polarization that's occurring, if I sit and listen to the student voices at Reco today, you multiply that and echo it by the staff. When you talk about teacher retention, it's a significant concern. I think one of the biggest things is raising them up in their profession and having them be recognized for the commitment and the work they're making and what they're doing. I talk to our employees right now. Any of our employees are highly sought after. So when you talk about businesses, you need employees, right? So we have an amazing secretary who went to an interview. We're going to lose her, but she went to an interview and basically during the interview tried to say why she shouldn't get the job because she really wanted to stay at their school. But she got more money and she got more vacation time. There's a value. We don't do a good job talking about what our staff do every day. We spend time defending what we think happened or the bad things that's happened, but we're not talking about all the great things that are happening. So how do I lift them up? It's recognizing them for the work they do. It's creating a culture and a system where they're valued for what they do. And that's through honest, transparent communication. It's opening those doors. Some of the irony we've talked about is through this pandemic, when we sat in the room on that Sunday after getting a call at 10:30 at night that, boy, we're going to have to put all of our kids out and you're going to have to create Google Classrooms and figure this all out, the angst and fear that our staff has. Because now I'm going to be everywhere. I can be recorded. I can be put out on Facebook. Not once did that happen, by the way. And the transparency that occurred and the connection that families got to have, that's super valuable. But we don't talk about that. We just keep working. And so I think to increase the morale and the culture, we need to recognize and value from what they're doing. Not that we haven't, but we can do a much better job of it. Signing bonuses would be great too, but that's thanks. No, you're welcome.
Yes.
If selected as the superintendent, can you share some initiatives that you plan to enact in order to better serve the students and also hire staff, faculty from underrepresented and diverse populations? And also, can you tell us of some examples of where you've done things like this in the past?
Absolutely, and I might have you have a multi-part question, so I may have to have you repeat.
Yep.
So initiatives. So really I don't know that it's much as an initiative, but a strategic plan and really setting those priorities. Like I said earlier, we're really focused on construction and things that are happening. There are a lot of other things that we're doing and great things that were happening in our system. So being able to target what those priorities are and clearly communicate them out to our community. The other thing is inviting our community in. The more voices that there are, the more input there are, the better solutions we have. The voice missing is students. That was very evident sitting today in our group. So one of the initiatives I would like, or how would I build that, is getting that student voice in. They have very insightful questions. They have very clear, articulate needs that they're identifying. And the reason we're doing this is because of our kids. So I think it's bringing forward their voice and what they need and having that come collectively into the plan. Staffing and how do we recruit and retain. That's actually a nation. So I just gave you the statistic of teacher shortage. Okay, how appealing is it for a teacher of color or an indigenous teacher to come into the system? There's lots of barriers that exist for them. The state right now is really trying to remove some of those barriers, but it's not increasing our teacher workforce. And so we have a long road up ahead of us to make this an appealing profession. Our kids deserve teachers that look like that and that come from backgrounds like that. There's a long road ahead. Initiatives that I've done, so I'm going to go back to my special education lens. So right now the largest shortage of teachers is in the area of special education. Just so you know, in special education there's 13 different disability categories. The state of Minnesota prides itself in having a licensed teacher for every category. Right, now we have this ABS, which it's a chicken soup of trying to deal with all the disability categories. But one example is a blind visual impairment disability. So you need to have a blind visually impaired licensed teacher. The state of Minnesota does not have a teacher prep program for a blind visual impairment teacher. So here's the state that requires the license to get that teacher, yet we don't have it. So how do we start connecting? And that's where regional connections and sources come through. So back as an assistant director and then director of special education, we started to see, and the turnover is high, right? 1 in 5 teachers who enter the workforce are going to leave within the first 3 years. They come in, it's stressful, they're trying to balance things. There's lots of input, not necessarily a lot of value or reward given. So special education is even faster. The statistics rise to almost 1 in 3. So worked with St. Cloud State University. I adjunct faculty there and convinced them that, hey, we really need a parent-to-teach program. We have individuals who are dedicating their lives to children in the classroom, and they are experts on these children. However, they've been removed or don't have a pathway to licensure. So we work with St. Cloud State. We did a parent-to-teach program. We allowed our staff to work. Then we had classes here on site in the evenings and weekends, right? And when it came to student teaching, they got to do their student teaching here, and then they went through their licensure. We had 24 start the program, 19 of them became licensed, and they're all teaching. Not all necessarily with us, but we kept as many as we can. That's an innovative solution. So the Professional Education Licensing and Standard Board is doing alternative licensure pathways. And so you're starting to see some of our regional centers really look at creating that alternative pathway. And to me, when you look at increasing teachers of color, or increasing our indigenous teaching population, and increasing our teaching population in general, we have to get creative of looking at regionally, how do we create that alternative pathway to happen.
You go ahead.
Yeah. I will echo Pete's comments and congratulations for getting this far.
Thank you.
As an employer, the school district is the 3rd largest employer in this county. A tremendous economic driver to the vitality of this region. So my question would be, how would you stay connected with our business community and promote local career opportunities for our students?
Great question. One, I think you do a fabulous job. I think Mr. Killian with our chamber does a fabulous job, and those are the partnerships that have to occur. We have Central Lakes College sitting right in our backyard behind our high school. That's a great pathway. Again, if you haven't been in the high school to see the advancement, and that was part of the commitment to the community, was with that career and technical side and finding out what does our regional workforce need and being able to create avenues and pathways for our young people to get there. The other appealing part is we want them to stay here.
Mhm.
And so that's part of really enticing them to stay in this community and giving them the broadest opportunity and perspective they can have, but they want to come back and commit to this community. So unfortunately, as the assistant soup and in my other roles, I haven't gone to a lot of the business events. I've been busy with few other things. But I think it is starting to have that connection. And the other thing I think the businesses need to know is they don't need to know this is superintendent. I mean, that's a great. But they need to know our administrators, they need to know our faculty, they need to know our student leaders, and we have to start that pathway and communication going as well. So it's exciting, and that's the other blessing of COVID. So how many families realize, well, I can go work from anywhere? So what's happening right now in the back of, I met another gal, she's adopted 2 of her grandkids, they're out on a walk, and moving to the area, they can work from anywhere, so now they've brought in 2 more students to an elementary school. And they just, because they love it up here, it's a great community, it's a community that loves its school district, but the other thing I can tell you is the people who come to Brainerd Public Schools and work in Brainerd Public Schools, trying to look for who's got their lanyard on. Who's got their lanyard on? How many years, Tammy? 30. So we have a thing here we do when we talk about valuable staff. We're very proud to be warriors. And it's a very big deal anytime we get one of our incremental pins. So if you talk about bang for your buck, and right? I don't know, pins when you order thousands of them aren't that expensive. But the fact when we get, and even when you first become a warrior, you get I'm a warrior, right? But then it's like I'm really proud when I got I'm a 25-year warrior. That was a really big deal. You can ask Janet. I yelled at her. I thought I was supposed to get. I get 25, and she's like, you don't get 25 till after you finish 25. Instead of waiting another 1 year. But our people who come here stay here, right? They love this community. They love what happens here. And I think I look at our Brainerd Public Schools Foundation, and so just I'll talk about our big event where we have a little fun. So the money that's been raised through those foundational events has been the largest in the last ever 2 years. That's during a pandemic, right? Crow Wing County Child Protection Team, I sit and we do the radiothon, which I love when people call. It's like a bucket filler when you recognize the same voices. Very generous community. They raise more money to support kids and families in the community. So Brighter Days Foundation Gala's coming up on Friday. We got our YMCA. This community gives and gives and gives for the students and the families of our community. There's no place like it. I'll get chills. I'll brag about it anywhere. Why do I want to stay? I'm not applying anyplace else, so you're stuck with me. So if I'm not your superintendent, great. I'll just keep working for you, and I'll still be involved in the community that I love. But that's it. And people come here and stay here. Our faculty come and they stay. I feel like once we can get you, we'll keep you.
Well, as we attract people, this is a show place.
Mm-hmm.
It truly is. And, you know, the referendum, I think, proved that to the outside community. According to the state demographer, we're the 7th fastest growing county in the state of Minnesota. And when you look at that and you take out, you know, the 7-county metro out of that, which, you know, only 3 of them are actually growing today, it's a huge economic driver for us. But this is when we bring people here to court them, to work in our communities, to work at our businesses, this is where we bring them. This is one of the first places we bring them. And there's a reason for that. You know, and continuing to make this school district move forward as we grow, obviously is gonna be a huge responsibility of the superintendent of the school. So it's exciting, but it's also a pretty big task.
It's a huge task.
Yeah.
And that's why if you didn't have the right people around you, it wouldn't be the job I'd pick.
Yeah.
So there's fantastic people, it's fantastic leadership. And I think the biggest advertisement we have for our district is our parents. Right now in education, you have more options for your child than you've ever had before. Right? Online, private, charter, half day. I mean, you have a menu of options, right? I want you to pick Brainerd Public Schools. Why? Because you're not going to get an opportunity for your child like any other unless they're in Brainerd Public Schools. And I think our families are the people to tell that story. Because we do. We have services birth to 21. We have a place where every child can find something to feel successful. Kids should come to school, not just to come to school, but they should come to school to belong. And Brainerd is going to be a school where you belong, where you grow, where you will have opportunity, beyond opportunity. If you haven't watched our legendary women or our distinguished Hall of Fame, you hear about Brainerd graduates and what they go on to do. You know, and it starts here. And I think every kid, there should be a fear of missing out. I want people who are driving around saying, boy, if my kid doesn't go to Brainerd, what are they missing? A lot, because we have a lot to offer. So, and I think that's what we can tell our businesses. It's a place you want your kid to go. Oh, sorry. Thank you for being here.
You're next, I think, and then you.
Okay, I gotta ask a hardball question.
Great, throw it.
Okay, you know I love you.
Love you
Okay.
too, Bob.
Okay, well, if I can say it that way, I was on the board. Okay,
Okay.
Rachel.
Yeah, I'm just waiting. I don't know if I should put my helmet on yet or not.
Okay, I don't know this. Okay, this is how my question is hard. You know, as a lifetime resident of Brainerd, as a former business owner, and getting back to what Mr. Glendon is talking about here, the successful superintendents that I've seen are the ones, and this goes back to Elliot Woolery, are the ones that really get involved in the community. Not only the involvement, but where the community steps alongside that superintendent because they respect them and want to work with that person. You are exceptional in the educational field, no doubt about it. I mean, you know everybody, you have a passion. What, during the pandemic, you worked 80 to 100 hours a week. I mean, that's passion. This is my big concern. When you get outside the school district, how is Heidi Hahn gonna be in the community? And I know some of it is joining civic organizations, but a lot of it's like being part of the business community too. Lane has been involved in a lot of those kinds of things, serving on some of the boards. So that's my only, everything else, the checklist, I check off everything for you as exceptional. But my big concern is how you're gonna be in the community.
Well, I've been here 26 years, Bob. So if there's a skeleton in my closet, I'm sure somebody knows.
Yeah.
I have been, I'm part of service groups. So current service groups right now, my Sunrise Sertoma, it's been a little delayed because when you're doing COVID, I'm finally starting to get back to be able to give that service side. I'm part of the 100 Women Who Care, although I think we're up to like almost 300. What is it?
Like high 200.
It's ridiculous, right?
Okay.
Outreach. So I spend a lot of time with outreach. Sean Hansen's amazing things. So just because I live here, I don't live here to work here. I live here to live here. And I think that's how you get invested in a community. So it's gonna be different. There should be higher expectation, but I also know I'm gonna be able to have those connections because there's some things that I'm gonna be able to transfer over in leadership. And again, there's excellent leadership in this district to be able to step up and do that and foster those relationships. But I do think because of my long-standing ties to Brainerd, I have lots of those connections. But can they be strengthened? Absolutely. and I'm committed to do that. Actually, I'm excited to do it, Bob. Again, I feel like I've been on a field trip all day today. And people say it's a long day. No, it's not. It's been a pretty nice day. Not gonna lie, lots of challenging questions. However, fostering that relationship, I feel like I have a good relationship with Tyler. I have a good relationship with Matt, Mary Gotch before that. Finding those key people. You know, there's women making waves. There's all that are distinguished. There's so many connections. Looking at sports boosters and the thousands that they give to people, and yeah. You wear it proudly. But the best part is the conversation we're gonna have. If I'm there, what is it about? Our students and what we're gonna do for our students on behalf of our community. So to me, that's embedded in the work we do.
And Heidi, I think a lot of the people in the community, and this is not meant in a negative way, you've been so involved in the school district, a lot of people haven't seen you on the outside. They know you're an administrator, they know that you work in the district, that you're passionate. But it's like those relationships that Lane fostered, like if we had not had the chamber during the 2018 referendum, I don't know if we would have passed question 2 or 3.
Yeah, that business partnership was definitely strengthened, and I think
Yeah.
Lane had a gift of doing that. The other thing I'll challenge you, Bob, start talking to the people and ask them what connection I've had with them. Because I think that's something too. I have a very broad connection outside of Brainerd Public Schools. More so because I've chosen to have it. I've chosen to have that relationship because it's good for me, it's good for what I believe in, and it's good for my faith and what I think should be instilled in a community. That's not always tied to the school district. So I think they get to see me in school because that's where you get to, especially when you became a COVID coordinator. Goodness gracious, if you didn't see me, you weren't paying attention. But I think that I just asked that question, and that's why I would challenge you. If you have a question, throw out your reference net to see what you can find. But I feel I have that connection. The thing is being able to invest more time in a different set on behalf of our students.
Okay.
Up here, we have one
sorry.
up here, and then we'll go back here. Thanks.
So I'm a mom of 2 elementary students, and I know all of our teachers are so overworked, underpaid. I know not everybody agrees with that. The most invaluable people, and I am really concerned with how our children's education was messed with. My one was in preschool, she went through kindergarten and 1st grade. She is struggling in math, and now our preschooler is gonna be into kindergarten, and I'm continually hearing from parents and kindergarten teachers how stressful. They love our children, they want more help. What would you put into place tomorrow to get those teachers more help? Because preschool and kindergarten are the foundational years.
So that's a great question. And honestly, when I look at our staffing, I think we're better staffed in preschool than we are in kindergarten.
Yes.
And so we've adopted a very intensive literacy model. If you've been in the classroom, which as a parent you get the gift of doing, and if you haven't, call a teacher, I'm sure they'll let you in. There is a lot of independent learning being required of our littles. So when you look at the support, there's a reason I lasted 1 year in elementary. So when I watch a kindergarten teacher, that's a lot going on. So whether you have 18 in the room or whether you have 24, it's a lot going on. And you think about being able to provide that individualized instruction. And so coming up with support tomorrow, I don't have it. If I did, I would have done it. I think Superintendent Larson would have done it. We all would have done it. I think getting some of our volunteers back, because I think the teachers are the master of their instruction, but sometimes keeping them all and then working in some of those stations, that's why we lost that for a couple of years. We relied heavily upon that and to have that engagement. So I think that's what could I do is, and what are we doing? We're finally opening the doors to have some of that. Long term, it is really looking at class sizes and how we have some of the smallest class sizes in the region, just so you know. Everybody thinks we're this huge district. We have some very small manageable class sizes, but it still doesn't make that difference. It's that individual attention. We have significant academic rigor. So I have a Pequot Lakes, not that I'm saying anything about Pequot Lakes, but it's just, I'm sure Brainerd had the same thing that talked about kindergarten graduation requirements in the 80s. They didn't even have to know all the letters of their alphabet. Right? So if you look at the rigor that's happening and the responsibility and the partnership that's having to happen with parents, and not all of our kids have that partnership. So
Well, in the emotional, so from preschool, which there is a lot more support, but the emotional maturity that happens, they don't have that in kindergarten. So I feel like the teachers are so overwhelmed and so overworked, and there almost should be like 2 licensed, or at least to have 2 in that classroom at all times. 'Cause that's a lot of kids.
That is, in most of our kindergarten classrooms, if you walk in, you'll typically see 2 adults. A lot of times it's the licensed instructor and then one of our para support staff. Some of that's tied to special education services, so it really is finding that balance and balancing out. There's some classrooms that have higher needs than others. So when you talk about if ands, I mean, trying to increase support to our youngest learners would be really important. But I also think we have rigor. If you look at the instruction, we have the first 30 days, so it really is teaching those routines. What I've really seen in the last couple years with learning, those routines were blown up. So I can tell you from reading scholarship applications with our foundation, I got to read, we have 240 scholarship applications. They all had to answer a question about obstacles. They talked about the interruption, right? Their routines. So we talked about straight A students who are now struggling to get above a 2.5 because they can't get out of bed. They're struggling to be motivated. It was hard. Then you think about our littles, right? Some of our littles haven't even had that opportunity. I watched with 5th graders. It was great. We got them in the door every day, but half the day they were staying in a large group in a cafeteria. That's significantly interrupted. So there's a lot of routines and things that we're having to go back and do and teach. But it is, we got to foster a stronger relationship with families, get our volunteers back in the door, and then we need to look forward to the future of support. And that is going to be, how do we fund that and create that? But I agree, they've been very dedicated. They're exhausted. Why do they come? They love their kids. Interesting thing, we don't have a mass exodus. I don't know if you've counted. Did anybody count how many teachers are retiring from Brainerd? 9. There's a lot of them that are eligible. They're not going anywhere. They have lots more they have to do yet, so that's a blessing. That's a great question. Thank you.
Good back here.
I've got 2 things, Heidi. One is you had mentioned what 54% of all licensed teachers are not teaching in the state of Minnesota.
I have to watch like 52, 54.
Yep. Well,
Depends on
we'll
which
say
biennial
50%.
reports. Yeah, 50%.
Why do you think that has happened in our state, or maybe even maybe it's in our nation? And then the other thing is your experience has been with Brainerd basically your entire career. What differences would you bring in the aspect of finances? You talk about strategic planning and that kind of stuff. How do you go about looking at things maybe a little bit differently, because you're saying, like Bob said, you're going to have to look like at a referendum. I'm here to tell you, as a business owner, I'm paying a ton now. And one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is that from businesses like mine and a business like Bob, they're saying, well, it's not no big deal. You can write it off on your taxes. It's not a matter of writing it off on your taxes. Because guess what? If I have to pay an extra $1,000 or $5,000, where's it going to come from? It's going to come from the citizens or the people that come into my facility. There's just no other way for me to do it. So that everybody's actually paying. So this is what I'm saying. So how do we, or what would you bring to that strategic plan differently than somebody else might?
I think because of the mode we've been in, we really have gone year to year. We can't look at it year to year. We have to look at a long range fiscal plan. And we can't, sometimes we hold our hopes on the what ifs. So we do need to speak with our local legislators. When there is billions of dollars in surplus, right, and we the taxpayers continue to pay, what can we do collectively to help leverage that? And I think that's a collective conversation from business owners working really specific to our region. And so I would look at it differently of really trying to create that long range stability and not necessarily counting on that influx in the income. You run an operating levy, it may pass, it may not. Right? So you still have to plan, and you still have to provide a world-class education based on that, and really being able to lay that out and what that look like. Looking at systems and efficiencies, I gotta be honest with you. Bring somebody else in from the outside, I think this is a district that's been very efficient with what it's doing. The hard part is the one time they think we do, I'll give you a perfect example. So our free and reduced lunch, right? So we've all talked about this is a very high area of poverty. We have transgenerational poverty. Working in my position as a mental health professional, I now get to see them and parents, and I'm working with their students. We don't leave. Our community members don't leave, so that burden still exists. So being able to have that discussion of finances and where it needs to go and laying that out long term, I think is super important. Having those conversations with businesses and input they have. The other thing, this is a very generous community. We've talked about sports boosters and things like that. We can't rely on that. So the example of free and reduced. So every student has had free lunch and breakfast for 2 years. What a gift. What a fantastic, fabulous gift. It's been a gift for every student and every family. However, there is a funding mechanism for schools for compensatory dollars that come from the families that fill out the applications. So one decision made legislatively over here, which is a benefit, also has a significant impact financially on a district. Those are things we can't plan for or navigate around. And I think having to come collectively around that is going to be something we need to do. And I think having an understanding. So you, the business over school finance, special ed alone. So 23% of the kids in Brainerd Public Schools are qualifying right now for a special education service. That's an expensive educational service. What can we do differently to approach that differently to make sure students are getting that early intervention or that early access? So, I'm gonna look at it differently long term, and I'm not gonna count on the what ifs. So, and I think being very cognizant, like I said, when we talk operating levy, when I look at what our businesses have endured for the last 2 years with all the restrictions that are applied, when I look at now with the cost of inflation was rising, but now we have a war that's happening and the impact from that area and the goods they produce and how it's going to play out for residents and families. So,
How about the teacher question, the licensed teachers that are.
oh, that's sorry.
What do you-
I jumped right ahead to finance.
No, that's fine, I just wanted to bring that,
It's
go backward onto it.
so anybody who works in the school system. So I'm going to talk about everybody who walks through our doors and even our bus drivers. They're doing it because of kids. I think these are individuals who feel their call. It's their calling to their profession. It's not you're not going to make the money. And lately, with the responses and politically, you're definitely not getting that. Boy, you are just doing a bang up job. And so that is the stress. So the other thing is when students walk through our door, there is an immense responsibility we feel for each and every one of them. And when you're not feeling the support necessarily from outside or from your system or even all the pieces that come into it, I feel like that's why teachers are leaving. So, and it's all in the, you can read the Fells Big Biennial report, but highly is. So if you look at just teachers, okay, most of our teachers hold a master's degree, right? They're highly educated. They at least hold a 4-year degree. You're in our tier 1 teachers. So as a parent of older kids, 4-year degree college and what they can do, there's a lot of other options. They're highly sought after employees. So if you're not feeling valued and there's other people who can employ it, a lot of people are exiting for that.
So what do you think that percentage of teachers leave here versus what leaves statewide?
Or a very low percentage. I don't have the exact percentage.
No, I understand.
Yeah, but I think that's a great question that we could calculate back.
Because that means something.
Oh, that's why I bring up we're very proud to be a warrior. And it's I don't want to say it's a badge of honor because it's not. I mean, when you get that 5-year, 10-year, someday I hope to have a 35-year, that's a big deal. And I think that's the difference. Our community, again, the examples I gave you from the foundation to the child protection team to things like that, our community wraps its arms around our kids. And again, the opportunities that we provide kids. And if I looked at the failed referendum and the group that stepped up to make sure the music and the arts and activities and athletics continued, that was because of the community, not a school system. So that's what makes it different. That's why I've chosen to stay for 26 years. So again, I'm not applying anyplace else. And I think I don't want to speak on behalf of our staff, but it's a pretty special place to be. They stay committed to it, even when it's hard. But now I'm going to go research. I want to get that statistic. So it's a great question.
All right. Heidi, so if you're selected as the new superintendent, kind of a fun question.
Oh, good. I like a fun one.
A little bit less stressful than some of the other topics, but if you could have one hope for what your realistic biggest accomplishment would be, say this is your job, and then someday you move on, right? You retire. Let's just say you're here and you retire from this. What would be your one biggest accomplishment that you hope comes to fruition out of the times that we are currently in? I know I know the answer I'm hoping you say, but I know it, we'll see what she's come up with.
That is a really fun question, because I guess, so it's almost like your legacy question. So I have a personal legacy that I want when I think of the system. I remember a day when a position would be posted in Brainerd, and we had 300 applicants for an elementary job. Right? Like, I want to come here. I want to be part of this. And I remember, let's say homecomings, and just the whole town stopped because there was something going on. I don't know that that's going to be me that does it, but that's what I want, right? That's what I want to see back happen. I want to see this become a district and a destination where teachers want to be, where families want to be, and where they want to have their kids in. So if I have one hope, it's to see our families that are choosing maybe other options to say that, no, this is the option I want because I know I'm going to get a world-class education and my kid's going to belong and they're going to have access to the things that they need to. So I think if I could leave, and even if I could see that growing, that would be amazing. It would be a baton I'd hope to pass along. And I know it can happen. I have no doubt that it can happen. Graduation rates are climbing. I think we can use them even higher. People get lost in the statistic. The state reports a 40 graduation rate. I challenge you to look at our 5-year and 7-year graduation rates. So we provide education all the way up to 21. So our kids that are taking a little bit longer to get through don't necessarily get reflected in that first statistic. I want to see that grow. I want to see kids not. I think we can decrease some dropout and get them connected, and I think get more connected to careers. So, but I want to see that come back. So I want our graduations, and I want our kids to just be very proudly saying they're from Brainerd. Fun but difficult question. Was that what you wanted?
Well, no.
Okay.
I can't tell you because I gotta ask it 2 more times.
Okay. That's true. We don't want to give it away. But I also think it's important that we do what people want, so we can adapt and be flexible and nimble to respond to the needs that are being identified.
Well, when you are selected, if you are selected, I will have that conversation.
Excellent. Even if I'm not, I'm going to come ask you.
Fair enough.
Just because I'm going to still be working here, so I want to know. So, just so you know, in the grocery store, I'll be stalking you. And just wait. Follow you home tonight.
That's fine.
I'm following you home tonight to ask the question.
Oh, thanks. Another tough question.
Okay.
Maybe I sat at that table too long.
You
but-
did, Bob. No, you were awesome.
No one's really talked about the students with loss. And I'm sure you have like a 100-day plan if you're hired by the board. Do you have ideas about how, and we know that much of it was related to the pandemic. You know, parents were frightened, their kids got frightened, and they responded by many of them pulling the kids and going to a smaller school. So how do you see yourself working on getting those kids back?
Well, again, I think there's a menu of options. So a fascinating part when we look at the largest number of students lost from last fall to the beginning of the school year was really 6th through 8th grade, and it was online options. So when you look at our high school options, so what's the number one reason high school kids pick a post-secondary option? Credit. Some people, I see it, some of them are going to get jobs, right? So I can take and I have that online option, or I can do that PSEO class that's a little bit more flexible that frees me up to get my job. Some of it is because I can get to practices. College credit.
College credit.
College
that's
credit
what I
is a
meant.
big driver.
That's what I meant by
Oh yeah, to
college
get a
credit.
2-year degree.
Yep.
Actually, the fascinating statistic in that is we have students who are actually looking to leave so they can get to a job.
Yep,
Right?
I'm sure.
They're looking to have that flexibility and that option to create in their day so they can get to a job, so they can get to a practice. Some of it is just having that independence and flexibility. When you hear the word open hour, kids who are doing some post-secondary online, because that's where if you look at our post-secondary, they've done a fabulous job marketing online opportunities. Some of the students taking that is just so they can have flexibility in their academic schedule. Do that, but it's a huge. That option didn't exist when I went to high school. I'm pretty sure if it did, parents would be pushing us to finish those 2 years. But we have college in the schools, right? So we can have that college credit now being awarded in the schools. Principal Rusk and her administrative team started to work on online education options pre-pandemic to try to create a comprehensive online high school opportunity for students within our own walls, so they didn't have to go someplace else to do it. So they had that flexibility. We have more kids leaving for the flexibility than we do for the college credit. That also is a reflection of our community and our community needs. CLC is a phenomenal partner. That partnership will continue. So. Part of it's having highly educated educators. You have to have a master's to be able to teach college and school class. So when we talk about retaining teachers to keep growing your students, there's facets that we need to do. Good question.
Right here.
Do I get to be the last one?
No, not necessarily.
I got all night. Yeah, I got all night.
There's a reason I want the last question.
Okay. All right.
I don't wanna take up my big yard.
Yes, sir.
I'm biased because I was promoted to my publisher position from within. You're coming up, definitely qualified, and I'm cheering for you, but what do you say to someone that says we maybe need an outside look? The other two candidates are from the outside. You've got a lot of experience on the inside. What do you say and what ideas can you present that challenges somebody from the outside?
So I personally, and as a professional in this organization, believe there's a lot of things that we need to take care of internally. I think right now, internally, our system, our staff, our stakeholders in our community, there's value of knowing that. To come in from the outside and try to get your feet grounded, get to know people and connect, that takes a lot of time. And so I think having those relationships fostered and developed, that's gonna be nothing but an asset. Right, I don't have to start, I don't have to think and go do research in 600 meetings to come up with a 100-day plan. Don't get me wrong, I'm gonna research and have lots of meetings to do those things, but I'm coming in with that set of knowledge. That's a blessing and a curse. Sometimes there's a new idea that somebody comes in that has no idea, that's never been part of our financial struggles, or has no idea of the things that are happening with our systems because they come in with a new idea. Or something that will help the system. That's what, the best part is I don't have to make that decision, the board does. And I am confident they'll make the best decision on behalf of our district and our students and our staff. But I think there's a lot of things to be said, especially when you look at financial stability, especially when you look at fostering relationships. You know, I challenge Bob, I have a lot of relationships outside of school. So,
And I didn't mean to say.
no, I know, but it is,
Yeah.
the public needs to know that, and that's where I think, check my references. That's the other blessing about being an internal and growing your own.
Mhm.
Right, I have a longer reference list than you'd probably care to know. But I encourage you to do that. I have nothing, I am who I am, I'm very genuine. Go ask people, go talk to people. They'll probably tell you good things, maybe not so good things, but they're gonna tell you honestly, because that's just how I am. And I think that's, again, where we're at. We're in very, I think, unstable, treacherous times coming off a pandemic and coming off differences in funding. And that would be very hard, in my opinion, to come from an outside and say, oh, this is what we're gonna be able to do. I also am a firm believer in grow your own. Right, when I look at the Prepare to Teach program, they knew what they were getting in for. They've been working and loving what they were doing long before they ever started that program. Those are the people you get. Those are the people. And I say when I get to hire people, so you can talk to people that I've hired. When I interviewed them, I said, I don't want you to come here for a career, I want you to come here for a life. So if you're gonna interview and if you're gonna be part of this team, our job is to get you here and keep you here. Why? Because when you're invested and you set down your roots, great things happen. It's not just a job, it's not just a pass. So to me, that's the difference.
And the rising topic of, that's coming to play with curriculum transparency. So with that, and that's one of the main reasons I started coming here way before NAS became the issue, and kind of got working with Mr. Murtha and yourself and some other staff for the curriculum piece. For the parents that feel that there are some questionable things, especially age-appropriate things, would you be open to more communication when it comes to that? I know the answer is going to be yes, because why would you say no? But
Well, you've walked those footsteps with us, so.
to open it up even more to maybe working on a 3-year plan of getting that curriculum online, so parents would then feel more welcome to knowing what is going on, and maybe those families who did leave for certain reasons would then say, oh, they are being transparent, and I see that now through that lens, and I will come back because of that. So to close that question, I guess, would be, would you be open to placing curriculum online if we could?
So right now, all of our curriculum maps are online. And the other thing is so if you have a student in, I would highly encourage, so the standards are all out there. Again, we don't set the standards, the state does. So I think becoming more educated in that. Now resources, we've had great discussions about, is it developmentally appropriate? And there are times too, depending on literacy levels and things like that, developmental appropriate discussions are absolutely spot on. And I think those are some of the conversations we've engaged in. But we are open and we have a policy regarding that, regarding every material and content within our educational instruction. So some of that is asking the question, not being afraid to come in. You can come and view all the curriculum. We've set out second grade curriculum, third grade curriculum. It gets a little bit more complicated at the high school with all the electives. But I haven't met a teacher who's gonna say, nope, not gonna show you what I'm teaching today. So being part of that, being able to have discussions around lesson planning. Think of this, but you gotta remember our staff are super busy too, so it's not that they don't want to. And again, the irony in the pandemic and transparency. We've never been more transparent with what we're instructing ever before than coming into everybody's living room and grandma and grandpa's kitchen table. To me, it's all out there. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't questions. There aren't gonna be things that need to arise when we look at literacy, especially when you walk into our book rooms and our libraries. Depending on the question or what your viewpoint is or your values and beliefs, you may question that. And to me, I think we're all very open to that discussion. At any point, a parent can opt out. I don't know how long our opt-out policies existed. I haven't gone back to look at the original date, but at any point, you can opt out. We have a process for if you want to challenge a certain text or a certain material, that process and policy has been in place. But I absolutely think. And can we do it better? Yes. But with ever-changing standards and I think having involvement, there's a lot of times where people just, well, it's fine. And I think if anything the unrest has done has brought us together to ask these questions and have better outcomes. Could be very open to that. I can tell you to try to put all your curriculum online. Have you ever watched your kids backpack come home at night?
All three of them.
Yeah, all three of them, right? And so now imagine having that all online. So the curriculum maps are there, like every single assignment and thing, it's not, but I think at any point the parent can ask and have that.
Okay, this is the question before the last question.
Oh my.
Oh, okay, okay.
Feel like it.
Another hard question, Heidi. I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend you, but,
Still gonna put my helmet on top, so
Oh.
this one makes me put a helmet on your trouble.
okay. Kevin brought up a really good point, and it revolves around money. We hate to say it, but everything revolves around money, whether we're an individual, a business, a governmental unit like a school district. And I know that we always think schools are different, and we've always looked at it that way. It involves kids, and because that, it's not really a business. But ultimately, when you have to do that revised budget, which is coming up soon, you're gonna have to say, oh boy, we've already cut the fat, we've already cut the sinew, everything. But you still gotta make a cut. And I know at times you're so passionate about education that it's hard to say, you gotta make this cut. How are you gonna be able to do that now if you're hired superintendent?
I can say I'm already part of the team that does that, right?
Okay.
I haven't had to make the ultimate decision, but I think the value of a superintendent is taking the input of their team.
Mhm.
And that would definitely be the type of leader that I am. So it's never gonna be well, I take responsibility 100%. That's what you do in the superintendent role, but I don't think it's gonna be acting individually. What's hard, internal? So yes, there's a budget, but I gotta be honest, when I see that budget, every cent of it is attached to a program, a kid, a person that I'm very attached to. So if I have a fault or if there's something, the objectivity. But I think if you're hiring somebody who doesn't think that way, that would be very concerning to me because we're in the business of kids. So if they're like, oh, it's a dollar amount, we can do whatever, that would be concerning. So I think when we make these decisions, which I have been doing since I've been an administrator and have lived through it even as a staff, we do all we can to insulate the classroom and the first layer that's directly attached to the student. And that's unfortunate because what we've done is, like you said, there's not a lot. We're getting down to the necessities of what needs to function. And so there will be difficult decisions to be made. I'm hopeful, and again, when I think of long-term planning, not waiting on the what ifs. So when I think about revising a budget, to me, a budget discussion is happening all year long. And we've talked as an administrative team too. You start that planning. You don't wait for a revised budget. There's very predictable things in school funding, right? So we've been fortunate. We've gotten 2% from the state. That doesn't always happen, but you can estimate. So you can plan out how that's going to go and start making those decisions rather than waiting. So that's gonna be the challenges, but you're right, internal and the value I have in here, I don't see a cent. I see a student, I see a teacher, I see a program.
And it's time for the last question.
All right. The reason I'm asking this is because I was informed that my daughter asked the first question today, so I wanted to ask the last question. So, with that being said, obviously we chose the school district because of the educational opportunities that are available for our kids. But as a young educator, will this be your last job?
I hope so.
Okay. I mean, we've had some changeover here in the last handful of years, and there's been, you know, I think consistency, certainly tenured consistency in a position like this is extremely important, and it's extremely important to the conversations we've all been having about community and you know, the financial wherewithal of this district. But it's to me, it's important to look and say, this isn't a short-term fix, this is a long-term solution.
So that's my hope. So if you want to talk about 5-year, 10-year plan, that would be my hope. I want to finish my career in Brainerd. Started here, I want to end it here. Had opportunity to go, chosen not to go. And so that would be my hope, but I also want to be held accountable. And if it's not going the direction it needs to go, then we need a different leader. So in that sense, that's the risk of, right? Was the risk anytime you take that chance? I love being a director of special ed. Loved it. That's a very stable role, by the way, too. The more you step away from that, assistant soup, was even more superintendent. There's a reason. Superintendent is in a long-term position because of the stressors. I feel like I know this community, I love this community, I can expect or try to anticipate those stressors. But the fact is, you're only as good as the people around you. Right now, we've got really great people. Otherwise, I don't think I'd ever be brave enough to step into this position. But I will be honest, will it be my last job? In public education, for sure. However, I do have high hopes of becoming a gray-haired, really smart-looking, very experienced, and I want to wear my experience, professor. Hopefully, I have some of that adjunct opportunity right now to train future principals and superintendents and directors, and but it's kind of a PD bucket filler for me. I'd like to do that long-term, and I'd like to have my golden ticket, and just like I'm going to do now, to see the events, but just kind of do that and be a lifelong educator. So in that sense, if somebody's brave enough after a decade of service again to let me pass on that wisdom and knowledge, then I'll probably do that or hope to do that. So full transparency.
Yes.
I do hope to be a very well-seasoned, wise professor someday.
Well, would you like to make a couple closing comments?
I just thank you for your questions and your investment. This is a reflection of the investment that we have. One thing I'd ask of you is go get involved. This is a very important decision for our district, and we're all relying on our school board to make the best decision they can. So please give them that input. Keep being invested like you're invested. And I just have to tell you today, I've had like the best day ever. It has been just a gift to have that one-on-one time with all of our different staff groups. But the highlight of my day, honest to goodness, was the time I spent talking to students. And they are wise, and they know what they need, and they know what they want, and it is our responsibility as staff and as faculty and as community members to make sure they have it. And they are definitely telling us what that is. And so we're doing a good job in that sense. They're not quiet in advocating for themselves. So I'm very blessed and feel very fortunate to have 26 years here, and I will hopefully have that good fortune. And actually, like I said, I have a job, so I'll keep working on your behalf as well. So thank you again for your time this evening.
And again, on behalf of the board, thank you for, as I said earlier, caring enough about this place to come at the end of a day and spend time in this process. And hopefully we'll see everybody back tomorrow and Thursday if at all possible. And be sure to fill out those feedback forms, and we'll get them collected and copied. And now Heidi is off for dinner with the board and back here at 7:30 for their final. Thanks again.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you.